What's up, Sugar Bushes? Welcome to another episode of Crime and Cosmetics. Today we are going to be talking about the absolute waste of space that is the Crossbow Killer. Yes, my dear, how can I help you? We're starting early? Okay, what's up? Yeah? You see the camera and you're like, oh, I know what this means. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I feel you. You want to give me like 5 seconds? Okay, cool. We're going to be talking about Stephen Griffith. Sorry, for some reason my brain wants to call him Chris. He just looks like a Chris. But he's an awful waste of space human being. But we are going to be covering him today. Do I know what look I'm doing? Absolutely not. I think I want to do my makeup for the day, and I'm feeling red and black, so we might do something with red and black. Who knows? Let me take care of this child. And we will get started and get our hair up and stuff like that. Alright, be right back. God, when I give the cats treats, Warchief knows exactly where to go, and it's on it. Toothless, sometimes I literally have to pick her up and put her face in them so she looks at them and sees that they're there. It's insane. She's just lost in the sauce sometimes, isn't that right, little baby? Alright, let's get started. So I usually just do black on the eyelids and then red up here. I might do black up around the edges, or like very thin line of black right here. I have no eyelids. It's so hard to do makeup because I have 0 eyelids. They really don't want to work with me, but we'll make it happen. Hey, you remember what happened last time you tried to steal treats from Toothless? She beat your ass, so back up. So December 24th, 1969, Christmas Eve. Old Stephen is born and would turn out to be one of the worst Christmas presents anyone could ever have imagined. His dad was Stephen Sr., who was a frozen food salesman, I believe, and his mom was a telephonist, whatever the hell that is. But it actually turns out his mother was a A-plus con man, or a con woman as I should say, and she actually ends up being charged with fraud for conning people out of money. So when Stephen is 13, his parents divorce. Him and his siblings go and stay with his mother. I figured they would have stayed with dad because in the eye of the courts his mom is a convicted criminal because she was convicted of fraud. But what the hell do I know? So one of Stephen's favorite pastimes that like wasn't creepy or anything was he would watch his mom knock boots with different men in their garden. Like, that's pretty weird of you, Stephen. But I get it, you know, your mom shouldn't be hawking ham in the garden, you feel me? But also, like, stop watching, weirdo. But Stephen's mom was not the only one that made use of these gardens. Stephen would go out there at night. He would use an air pistol to kill small animals and dissect them like a totally sane person would do. There's that McDonald's triad. Torture of animals. And when he wasn't dissecting animals or watching his mom be the conductor of the choo-choo Chabooti, he would shoplift pretty regularly. In one of these shoplifting incidents, the store clerk actually caught Stephen, and Stephen pulled out a knife and straight up slashed this dude's face open. So yeah, that was a super fun thing to do. Nothing to really brighten your day like slashing someone's face open with a knife. So he was around 17 when this happened, and he was sent to, he was pretty much sentenced to spend 3 years in youth custody. So while in youth custody, he pretty much loses all contact with his family. They just stop communicating with each other. And he tells anyone who will listen that his dream in life is to be a prolific serial killer. Like, he was, like, even to psychiatrists, he was like, this is the bee's knees and this is what I want to do. I want to murder people. It's all I can think about. So after his arrest for the old face slashing, he was released a year later. He then gets a, where did he get his flat? He gets a flat in Manningham. Sorry, and I'm a big stupid dummy. This is happening in the UK. I apologize. I never said anything about the location. That was my bad. So like I said, our boy gets a apartment near, or a flat as they call it over there. He gets one in Manningham, not sure where that is, sorry. Near the red light district. I do know what that is, though. Never been to one, but I know what it is. Played a lot of GTA growing up. He also enrolls in Bradford College and begins studying psychology. So in 1989, Stephen gets 100 hours of community service for possession of an air pistol. And then the year after that, he's arrested and locked up because he just, held a knife to a young girl's throat and threatened her like a fucking psychopath. So after he's released for that little fun incident, he begins collecting a ton of books on like serial killers and things of that nature. Heavily focusing on Jack the Ripper, the Moors murder, the acid bath murderers, and his personal favorite, the Yorkshire Ripper. So when Stephen is 22 years old, he ends up pulling a knife on a group of girls who he believed to be were laughing at him, and that is not the case. Now, because of this fun little incident, someone keep knives away from this man, he is diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. Now, it's also known as schizoid psychopathy. This is apparently an entirely different diagnosis than schizophrenia. When I first heard someone be like, oh, he was a schizoid, I was like, we shouldn't be calling people with schizophrenia schizoid. That feels like ableist to me for some reason. But apparently it's a whole different thing, so the more you know. So individuals with schizoid personality disorder experience lack of interest in social relationships, drawn to solitary or sheltered lifestyles, secretiveness, emotional coldness, detachment from reality, and apathy. Affected individuals may be unable to form intimate attachments to others and simultaneously process a rich and elaborate but exclusively internal fantasy world. This was Stephen to a T. He was very, very, very much into fantasy worlds. So in 1988, Stephen gets a girlfriend. Good for you, bud. Her name is Zeta Pinder, and they meet through the newspaper's Lonely Hearts column. So on their first date, they meet up at a pub, grab some dinner, grab some drinks. Stephen gives her a professional portrait of himself that he had made on their first date. I don't know, I mean, that could be a little weird, but weirder things could happen. Especially with this man. Zeta said that Stephen really loved horror films, and that's really not a red flag, because I can almost assure you just about everyone watching this video right now really loves horror films. You know, horror films, true crime community, they kind of go hand in hand. But Zeta said he really, really liked horror films. At one point, she said they would be watching a horror movie and someone would die on screen and Stephen would just laugh, uncontrollably laugh every time someone was murdered on screen. And that gives me very edgy edgelord vibes, but, you know, that is quite off-putting. Zeta also said that Stephen was a major, major paranoid sleeper. He was afraid of, like, bugs crawling into his ears. And he had to, like, plug his ears with, like, cotton every time he'd go to sleep. And this entire time of the relationship, which lasted, like, 2 years, you know, he was always staying at Zeta's house. But one night she said there was a night where she didn't have any cotton for him to stuff his ears. So he ended up staying up the entire night because he couldn't go to sleep knowing that there might be a bug that would crawl in his ear. So like I said, this entire time, Zeta thinks that Stephen just lives with his parents or whatever, and that's why he's never invited her over. She didn't know he had his own apartment until she, like, mentions it or something like that, and he's like, oh, yeah, you know, I got my own place, and she's like, oh, well, why don't you invite me over? And he was like, oh, yeah, sure, you can come over, like, we'll go over there tomorrow. And that's what happened. So Stephen invites Zeta over to his apartment. They show up. Zeta says when she goes in, she notices that he has just about, he has an extensive horror movie collection, which is probably something that wasn't surprised her. She had just about every book known on serial killers and other things of that nature, and that he had just, like, weapons lying around his house, like crossbows, knives, stuff like that. And that portions of his house were covered in plastic, Dexter style. If you don't know who Dexter is, I'll put up a picture of, like, what the plastic I'm talking about is. And that freaked her out. All of that combined really did freak her out, and she was like, oh, hello, this is cool. I gotta go. I gotta left the oven on. Gonna have to skedaddle on out of here. And she does. She leaves, and she breaks up with Stephen over the phone the next day. Hey, baby, I love you. I love you so much, but you gotta go. That woman's intuition was on point. For her to walk in and be like, huh, I need to get the HE double hockey sticks the fuck out of here, so that's cool. And then to just leave, good for you, good for you. So like I said, Zeta breaks up with him. You know, their relationship ends. You know, seemingly there wasn't really anything crazy happening during that relationship, you know, compared to his next relationship. So he begins dating a woman named Kathy. Now, Kathy is a correctional officer. And only 2 weeks into this lovely, lovely relationship they have going on, Steven begins showing his true colors. He became very controlling. He became very violent. He kept, you know, he wouldn't let Kathy go anywhere unless he was with her. He kept telling her that he wanted her to move in with him, but Kathy was an animal lover and had 2 dogs, and I don't think Steven's, you know, flat could allow pets, and that was real upsetting to Steven, and he felt that these dogs were getting more attention than him, so he decided he was going to do something about it. So Steven basically drugs Kathy, and whatever he gave her does not mix well with medication she is already on, and she begins like, she's basically like, I need to go to the hospital, something is wrong, and she's getting real nauseous, real dizzy, like she's, you know, having a tough time functioning. While this is happening, Steven, you know, she's kind of like, what's happening, what did you give me, like, what's happening to me? Steven is standing over her, laughing maniacally, and just tells her, you're dying, which is absolutely terrifying. Well, anyways, Kathy ends up having to drive herself to the hospital because Steven refuses to call an ambulance. And when Kathy leaves, Steven also leaves. When Kathy comes home from the hospital, because she had to stay overnight, she comes home to find that her dogs are missing. And Steven says, oh, you were robbed, even though nothing else in the apartment was gone. But a neighbor confirmed that when Kathy left for the hospital, Steven also left, but he came back a little while later and took Kathy's dogs. Apparently, Steven did not harm these dogs, he just gave them away to random people. But anyways, he pretty much forces Kathy to move in with him at this point because she kind of doesn't have anywhere to go. And she basically becomes trapped by Steven. So this whole relationship only lasted a year, and through her year, and when she moves in with Steven, he becomes just some fucking awful human being. He beats her regularly, would break her nose, bust her face up, and he would tell her, you know, oh, I like it when you fight back, it gives me a thrill, like a real psychopath. And in 2001, Kathy finds out that she is pregnant. Good lord. So she finds out she is pregnant, and Steven's behavior pretty much changes, and he becomes, you know, really excited to be a dad, this, that, and the other. Seems like he's really turning a new leaf. But he was still not a good person, so he did not go to any of Kathy's appointments with her. And this included the appointment where she found out that her pregnancy was ectopic. Is that how you say that? Ectopic? I believe so. Which is where the pregnancy happens outside of the uterus. So Kathy comes back and she tells Steven, like, hey, this pregnancy is ectopic. It's, you know, the baby's not going to happen. And so he takes the positive pregnancy test that they had saved, and he puts it in he makes a coffin for it, which I guess people grieve differently, so not gonna judge them. So Kathy and Steven go on vacation, and while they're on vacation, Kathy enlists the help of one of Steven's ex-girlfriends, Amanda, and Amanda goes into the apartment and she packs all of Kathy's things while they're out on vacation. And so as soon as they get back, Kathy is like, all right, see you later, and skedaddles and breaks up with Steven. Major girl boss moment on Amanda's part. What an MVP. So after they break up, Kathy pretty much goes into hiding because Steven will not stop harassing her. They only dated a year, but this harassment goes on for like 10 years. Even though she was hiding, Steven would still find ways to contact her. He would trick Kathy into talking to him again. He would show up, you know, to her work or whatever, or try to at least, or try to show up to where he thought she'd be. There was one instance where Steven slashes all of Kathy's tires, and then while on his way home, intentionally gets into a car accident and tells paramedics, like, hey, call this person. They're my emergency contact, which was Kathy. And Kathy, being a good person, excuse me, being the good person that she is, like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll go help him. He was just in a car wreck. And then as she's about to go help him, he's like, oh, yeah, I just slashed all your tires, so you're going to have to find a different way to get here. And she's like, oh, okay, well, then I'm not coming to help you. Have a good one, and hangs up on him. Dude was out of his damn mind. So, another instance, and trigger warning for animal abuse, so if you want to skip on ahead, by all means, baby. One instance, Stephen knew that Kathy was an animal lover, so what he does is he goes out and gets a small puppy. And with this puppy, he feeds it a bunch of, like, Valium or whatever, and essentially sedates it. He then cuts the puppy's tail off, and calls Kathy and tells her what he's doing. Luckily, Kathy was able to save the dog and give it a good loving home, but that's absolutely bananas. Like, what a fucking awful human being. So like I said, Stephen aggressively stalked Kathy for 10 years. She would take protective orders out on him, and he would disappear, and then around the time the protective orders ended, he would kick the stalking back up because he knew it was going to take a minute for her to get a new one. At one point, Kathy thought he was done and had moved on and decided it was time to move out of her parents' house and move into her own place. And she did that, and Stephen ends up finding her. She had went on vacation, and while she was away on vacation, Stephen decided he was going to, basically, Kathy had some pets, and she had some indoor cats that she took care of. She had outdoor cats. They were basically strays that came up to her house all the time. She'd feed. She considered them theirs. So while she was away on vacation, Stephen decided he was going to kill the outdoor stray cats because he knew which ones she would feed because he stalked her regularly. He then graffitied her entire house and took paint and painted all of her windows yellow, which... Why? You're, like, the essence of a madman. So, since Kathy's been getting all these protective orders against him and calling the police on him and stuff like that for doing all this stuff, the police are very well aware of who Stephen is. Stephen would also contact women through MySpace and pretty much message them and be like, oh, I know your exact location right now, I know where you are, blah, 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 blah. And when they wouldn't message him back, he'd be like, oh, you need to answer me, I know where you are, I could do this, that, and this to you. Just out of his damn mind. He loved MySpace, though. He had his MySpace was essentially set up for his alter ego. His name was Vin Pariah on it, and he would regularly post statuses quoting serial killers, fictional serial killers, stuff like that. Just a lot of edgy stuff, you know, kind of the essence of MySpace. So in 2007, police start actually looking into Stephen seriously because they're like, man, this guy is stalking people. He is taking his pet lizards on walks. This is all true stuff, by the way. He is stalking people, taking his pet lizards on walks. Sorry. You know, people have told us he's been openly reading books about dismemberment, just like out willy-nilly in the open. There were a few instances where he would eat live baby mice, so maybe we should look into that. So they call the people that are in charge of the building Stephen lives in, and I would imagine the phone call went something like this. Hello, this is the management company that manages the building that Stephen lives in. How can I help you, lad or lass? You know, because it's in the UK. Is that what you guys call each other over there? I don't know, dude. I have no clue. Oh, hey, champ. So this is like the British Redcoats, and we just like, there was this thing going on. This guy, he was like stalking people for a while, and then he like ate some live baby mice, and he posts really edgy things on MySpace about killing people and like dismemberment and stuff like that, and like quoting serial killers, stuff like that. Wow, what a nerd. I know, right? But he lives in the building that you manage. Oh, yeah. See, you see where I'm going with this. So he lives in this building that you manage, and I was wondering, even though it's my job as a public officer to, you know, monitor the public, you know, maybe scope out some crimes. I was wondering if you could take the reins on this one and keep an eye on him, you know, kind of monitor his comings and goings, if you could, for us, please. Yeah, absolutely. We can, yeah, sure, you know, of course. Why would we say no to that? He's in our building, you know, we're there a lot, actually, you know, because it's our building. So we'll take care of it. Don't worry. Don't you worry your pretty little badge. Go get some chalky milk and some biscuits. That's amazing. So if just keep an eye on him. If anything happens, you know, he does some weird stuff or like out of like hurting other people, weird stuff. He's already pretty weird. You know who to call. Ghostbusters? No, you dumb, stupid, dummy. 999, because we're in the UK here, and 911 is for those dumb Yanks across the pond that absolutely beat our ass a long time ago. But now look at them. Look at their country. It's... Oh, yeah, you're right. My bad. Alright, well, if I see anything, I'll give you a call. Love you. Okay, love you too, sugar. Goodbye. I don't think that's how the actual phone call went, but I would like to believe in my head that's how it went. So anyways, this apartment complex is like, yeah, absolutely we can do that because we're good people. And they go the extra mile and they set up a brand new security camera in Steven's hallway where his flat is to monitor his comings and goings. They really went above and beyond, and them doing that is one of the things that helped him get caught. So in 2009, when Steven decides that playing fantasy isn't going to cut it anymore, Susan Rushworth is the first woman to go missing. Susan was born on New Year's Eve. She suffered from epilepsy due to an accident she had when she was 17. She had been married at one point in her life for around 10 years, and she had 2 children from that marriage. Unfortunately, the marriage, you know, after 10 years, it wasn't working anymore, so her and her husband decided to get a divorce, So with the pressure, the stress from the divorce, as well as dealing with, you know, her condition, it caused her to turn to drugs, unfortunately, and at one point she got married again and had another child from that marriage, and that ended up not working out either, and she went through another divorce, and the addiction the addiction that she was dealing with eventually caused her to turn to sex work. At one point, while, you know, working in the red light district as a sex worker, she even ran into her oldest daughter who was doing the same thing, and her oldest daughter kind of like teamed up because Susan wanted to make sure her oldest daughter was protected and taken care of while out on the streets, and she sounds like an absolute fucking sweetheart. So at one point, Susan decides that she is tired of struggling, you know, she's tired of this battle with addiction. She no longer wants to do sex work. So she begins to try and turn her life around. At the time of her disappearance, she was 6 weeks sober. She had been staying with her parents until she got back on her feet. She was helping her mother take care of her father, who was diagnosed with dementia, which, that must be a challenging task. June 22nd, 2009 was the last time 43-year-old Susan was seen alive. She had went and seen some friends at one point. She then made plans to meet up with another friend later that night, and she had also planned to pick up her methadone prescription from the doctor's office. Unfortunately, Susan never meets her friends later like she had planned or picks up her prescription, and when she didn't return home that night, her mother seemed very, very worried because, you know, Susan was actively turning her life around, so it wasn't like her to just stay out all night. She calls the police and reports her missing. So it's believed that Susan somehow ran into Steven during the day, and he had convinced her to come back to his apartment. You know, like I said, Susan was turning her life around. That is a very hard thing to do. Rome is not built in a day. Police did check Susan's phone records and did see that the last call from her phone was to a friend of hers that also happened to be her dealer, so it is speculated that maybe she had a relapse and she needed money to pay for the drugs, and she knew sex work was a quick way to make this money, and that's when she ran into Steven, and he had convinced her to come back to his apartment under the guise of paying for her services. So Susan's body has actually never been found, and Steven, being the little fucking worm that he is, refuses to tell police where it is because it's information that, I don't know, maybe holding on to that information makes him feel powerful. Either way, he's fucking scum. The only reason police know that Susan was in Steven's apartment is because they found traces of her blood when they searched when he was finally caught, and Steven, when confessing to the murders, told police that he had bludgeoned Susan to death with a hammer inside his apartment. So 10 months later, Stephen finds Shelley Armitage. Now, Shelley Armitage was 31 years old. When growing up, she was a great student. She was very smart, very intelligent, and she was absolutely beautiful and aspired to be a model. Unfortunately, she, as happens to so many people, she starts, using party drugs or whatever, and eventually runs with the wrong crowd or what have you, and eventually turns to stronger drugs, and this starts that cycle of addiction, and to pay for these drugs, she turns to sex work, and that's how she runs into Steven. So April 26, 2010 was the last time Shelley was seen alive. She was working in the red light district that was very close to Steven's house. She never returned home, and her boyfriend reported her missing. Police began questioning people in the area, and they had kind of an idea that these two women who were missing were connected in some way, but they just hadn't put it together yet. So Steven lures Shelley into his apartment under the guise that he is going to pay for her services. Once inside, he shoots Shelley with a crossbow. Now, he uses public transportation to dispose of Shelley's body. While on this public transportation, he drops his phone. His phone is then picked up by a stranger and taken to a pawn shop to be sold. Now, the pawn shop owner is going through this phone to clear out all the data so he can put it up for sale. And while he's doing this, he uncovers a very, very disturbing video. Trigger warning, it's very gruesome. I'm not going to show it, I'm going to explain it, but it's very, very, explicit. So, on this video that was on Steven's phone, the first scene is a woman who is hogtied on his bed. She has the words "sex slave" spray painted on her back. The video then quickly cuts, and the next scene is in Steven's bathroom. There is a woman who is clearly deceased, and he is in the process of dismembering her, and he is heard narrating exactly what is happening. He says, "I am Vin Pariah. I am the bloodbath artist. Here is a model who is helping me," which is absolutely disgusting. So the pawn shop owner finds that video. He's pretty much traumatized for life, because that's some heavy shit, especially a live person, like not just a fake video or like a horror movie you see where it's all fake. Real life person being dismembered. Bro, so I had to change the battery in my camera. I know the look has progressed a whole lot more because I forgot to hit the record button. I was sitting here talking like a big dumb idiot. Like I said, that the pawn shop owner's traumatized for life. Unfortunately, by the time this video was found and reported to police, it was already too late. Steven had already taken the life of his third victim. Susan Blaemeyers, I believe that's how you say her last name, who was actually a friend of Shelley's. Susan was born February 26, 1974. She was 34 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was the oldest of 3 children. She came from a very, very good, loving family. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. Her dad made enough money to where she could do that, and whenever he got time off work, they would go on these great vacations. Some of Susan's friends were even like, yeah, I remember being jealous of how, great her family was. But, as we know, addiction does not discriminate. Doesn't matter where you come from, you can still fall into the cycle of addiction. So at one point, Susan was going to school to be a nurse. Unfortunately, she starts hanging with the wrong crowd, and she falls out of that cycle of going to school and into the cycle of partying, doing drugs. She was dating a guy who was addicted to certain substances, and in turn got her addicted to them. So she eventually finds herself addicted to heroin. She was married at one point, but that marriage broke apart. She moves in with a well-known drug dealer whose name was, I believe, Ifli Hassan or Hussein. I think that's how you say his name. I didn't want to leave his name out because I believe he, pretty much contributed to Susan's death, because basically he gets her addicted to crack cocaine, then forces her to go work in the red light district doing sex work, and if she brought home less to pay for those drugs, and if she brought home less than $200, he would ruthlessly beat her. And I hope to God he is 6 feet in the ground right now. So while working, Susan went under the name Amber. So she runs into Steven And like the other girl, Steven convinces her to come back to his flat under the guise of paying for her services. And once she is inside, Steven ends up attacking her. Now, Steven does something different that he didn't do with the other women. He decides to keep her captive for 2 days, and at one point, Susan actually escaped. Man, I did the lines, the upside down crosses look thing. I just don't really like it a whole lot. I mean, I can try it again and see if it looks better with 2 of them. Hold on. Not my best work. It's what it is. Let's get this red a little bit more vibrant. So like I said, Susan actually manages to escape. She makes it out of the apartment and is running down the hallway when Steven steps out of his apartment and shoots her with a crossbow. Now it all gets caught on camera because of the CCTV camera that is located in the hallway that the building put there to monitor his comings and goings after getting talked to by police. Steven does not really care though. He basically, he walks up to Susan and he shoots her once more in the head with this crossbow and drags her body back into his apartment. About 20 minutes later, he comes out of the apartment. He walks up to the camera, still holding the crossbow, and gives the camera the finger. And you can see that in this photo here. Steven then walks back into his apartment and then walks out 10 minutes later holding a drink and does like a cheers motion to the camera before walking back into his apartment. So May 4th, 2010, hold on one second, let me do this little line real quick. A man by the name of Peter Gee is going over the CCTV footage and witnesses what happened. He witnesses Steven shooting Suzanne with a crossbow. Talk about being traumatized, poor guy. And he ends up calling police, and police basically surround the building with 60 officers and force entry into Steven's apartment. When they force their way in, he calls from another room, "I'm in here," and they come and arrest him. So while being interviewed by the police, Steven tells them that he actually has killed 6 women in total, and that he even went as far as to eating parts of them after he had killed them. Now, this cannot be confirmed because, again, his whole want in life was to be a prolific serial killer, so it could definitely be something that he said to, fucking for shock value or whatever. But that's what he said. He said he cooked them in like the slow cooker, and then also he tried eating some of like a couple pieces raw. So while he was incarcerated, they searched a nearby river because a black bag had floated to the surface and was reported by police. Upon investigation, this black bag contained the head of Susan with a crossbow bolt still stuck in it. Police were able to find a portion of her remains. They speculated that she was cut up into around 80 pieces, but they weren't able to find all of them. And at Susan's funeral, they had a smaller casket because they couldn't find the rest of her. They also find bags in the river that contain hacksaws and razors and other weapons that they believe to be Steven, so they take them, they run tests on them, and they actually end up finding a small piece of spine that was determined to be or belong to Shelley. So Steven tells investigators pretty much everything. Everything they, except where the body of Susan was, which still he has refused to tell where that is to this day. And on December 21st, 2010, Steven pleads guilty to all 3 murders, receiving a life sentence, the judge saying, "The circumstances of these murders are so wicked and monstrous, they leave me in no doubt that the defendant should be imprisoned for the rest of his life." So before taking his first victim's life, Steven actually did update his MySpace status, and it said, "What will this pseudo-human do, one wonders? Poor Steven pretended to be me, but he was only the wrapping. He knew towards the end that I supplied the inner core of iron. Hatred bound tightly in flesh. At very long last, the time has come to act out." So while in prison, Steven has gone on hunger strikes. He's not having a good time there, by the way. He's gone on hunger strikes. He's tried to unalive himself multiple times. And all in all, he's not having a great time in prison. I hope he's getting the absolute shit kicked out of them on a daily basis, if we're being completely honest. I was listening to a podcast to get some information about this case, and it was the podcast Morbid, and they talked about how people, you know, kind of just like diminish when sex workers go missing, stuff like that, because it's a high-risk lifestyle. And they were talking about, it's not the first time I heard of this, but I thought I'd bring it up. They were talking about how it's crazy that people will, you know, write off sex workers being murdered or abused as, well, they took that risk, it's a high-risk lifestyle. But when someone else in a high-risk lifestyle dies, that's not the case. It's like, oh, you know, like, for instance, I was in the Army. That's a high-risk lifestyle. If I were to die, no one would be like, well, you know, that's the life he chose, man. You know, I have no sympathy for him. I think it's just pretty ass backwards, and they made a really good point about that. But that is the story of the Crossbow Cannibal, Crossbow Killer. He coined that name himself, by the way. He called himself that in court, and the media ran with it, kind of like the way BTK did it. But yeah, he's an absolute monster, a fucking scummy worm who I hope is getting his ass kicked in prison as we speak. So this is probably all I'm going to do for this look. I got to go and play some D&D, and then I got to record some more videos after this. Not the best look, but it doesn't look terrible, so I'm not upset about it, love. So let's pick our crime for next week. Alright, who are we going to cover next week? If you want a case to be covered, go ahead and leave it in the comments of this video, and I will throw it in the murder pot. Oop, there's one. The Axeman of New Orleans. That is who we're going to be looking at next week. Don't want to put him back in there. I love that case. I think that's a case that pretty much anybody who likes spooky things or the true crime community knows of. But it'll be fun to cover. Maybe I'll learn something I don't already know about it. But thank you so much for stopping by for another lovely episode of Crime and Cosmetics. I love you so much. You are the best, and I appreciate and value your support more than you know. I hope you have the best day ever. I hope all the good things happen to you. Please, please, please remember that you are loved, you are cherished, you are valued. There is always a place for you here in this community. And if I am going to keep pushing forward, then you must as well. I will see you next week. I love you so much. Bye-bye.